The sun was setting slowly over the small colony. The sky turned red and orange, and shadows stretched long across the dry ground. On the edge of the colony, where broken walls and wild grass grew, a small alien girl was working alone. She was thin, her hands rough, and her clothes were torn from long days of hard work. Yet her eyes burned with determination as she lifted one brick after another. She placed each brick carefully, as if the wall she was building was the most important thing in the universe. Her small body trembled under the weight, but she refused to stop. Dust covered her face, sweat ran down her forehead, but she kept moving. She was building something bigger than herself, a house brick by brick. Far away, a man stood watching. He was a human, older, with tired eyes and a face shaped by grief. His name was not known in the colony, for he had stopped talking to people long ago. He had once been a husband and once a father, but now he was only a widower, alone with his silence. When he saw the alien girl, something inside him moved. The way she struggled reminded him of his younger days when he had dreamed of building a home with his wife. They had planned everything, the walls, the garden, the rooms filled with laughter. But fate had been cruel. His family was gone, and all he had left were empty memories. Now as he stood in the shadows, he watched the girl stacking her walls. Each brick she placed struck his heart like an old memory. Why was she doing this alone? Where were her parents? Why did no one come to help her? The girl's hand shook as she lifted a heavy stone. She almost dropped it, but she bit her lip and pushed it into place. Her determination was stronger than her weakness. The widower could see the pain in her arms, but he also saw something else. Courage. It was rare to see courage in someone so young. The man took a step forward but stopped himself. He felt a strange pull as if he wanted to go and help her, yet his feet froze. He had promised himself never to care again, never to feel that kind of pain again. But the sight of the girl was breaking through his walls. Hours passed. The sky turned dark, stars appeared one by one, and the cold night spread across the land. The colony lights glowed in the distance, but the alien girl kept working. She did not light a lamp. She did not stop. She only worked with the moonlight shining on her small figure. The widower whispered to himself, "Why is she doing this? What does she hope to build?" His voice cracked as he remembered his own unfinished dreams. He knew the answer already. She wanted a home. Everyone wanted a home. Suddenly a sound came from the bushes. The man's eyes narrowed. He noticed movement, shadows shifting. Someone else was watching the girl too. He felt unease, but before he could see clearly, the shadows vanished. He wondered if it was his imagination, or if real danger was near. The girl, unaware of any threat, carried on. She stopped only to wipe her forehead with the back of her hand. For a moment she looked up at the sky, as if searching for someone who would never return. Then she bent down again, lifting another brick. The widower's chest tightened. He wanted to walk away, to return to his lonely corner of the colony, but he could not. His feet stayed planted. Something about this child pulled him toward her. She was alone, just like him. But unlike him, she still fought. He whispered again, "Why don't you stop? Why don't you rest?" His words faded in the night, unheard by the girl. As the hours dragged on, his mind replayed old images. His wife smiling, his children running in a garden, the sound of laughter in a house that no longer existed. He clenched his fists. Watching the girl build, he realized that she was doing what he had once dreamed of doing. She was refusing to surrender. At last, the girl collapsed onto the ground. Her arms were too tired, her body too weak. She leaned against the half-built wall and closed her eyes. But even then, she smiled faintly, as if proud of the small progress she had made. The widower's heart ached. He wanted to step forward, to offer her water, to tell her she didn't need to carry this weight alone. Yet he stayed hidden in the shadows. He was still afraid. Afraid of caring, afraid of feeling alive again, but deep inside a thought began to grow. Maybe, just maybe, watching her was not enough. Maybe he had to do more. As the night deepened and silence filled the air, the widower realized something. This girl was not just building a house. She was building hope, and hope was the one thing he thought he had lost forever. The story of the widower and the alien girl had just begun. The night was heavy and quiet, the kind of silence that made even small sounds feel loud. The alien girl sat on the cold ground beside her half-built wall. Her hands were swollen, her fingers cracked, but her eyes did not close for long. She forced herself to stand again. Slowly, she reached for another brick. Her body shook. Every muscle begged her to stop, but her heart refused. She pressed her lips together and lifted the brick as if she was carrying her whole life on her shoulders. The wall in front of her was crooked, not strong, but to her it was more than stone. It was safety, a dream, a home. Far in the shadows, the widower still watched. His heart ached as he saw her struggle in silence. Every time she lifted a brick, he felt her pain. Every time she staggered, he remembered how he too had once fought against life's weight. He thought of his late wife again, the way she used to remind him that home was not walls, but the love inside them. Yet here was a girl building walls with her own hands, as if love might return once the house stood complete. The widower whispered under his breath, "Why don't you rest, little one?" But the girl could not hear him. She kept working until the stars blurred in her tired eyes. Then it happened. Her foot slipped on loose gravel. The brick fell from her arms and hit the ground with a sharp crack. The sound echoed through the empty land. She froze, afraid that even the earth itself had betrayed her. For a moment she bent down, holding her knees, tears slipping from her eyes. She was not crying loud, but silent tears, the kind that came from wounds too deep for words. The widower's chest tightened. His legs moved forward by instinct, but he stopped himself again. He wanted to help, but fear kept his hands empty. He had promised never to care again, because caring always ended with loss. Yet his eyes refused to leave her. Minutes passed. The girl picked up the broken brick, stared at its sharp edge, then carefully set it back on the wall. Even broken pieces could be used. Her small hands trembled, but she worked again. Suddenly, the widower noticed something else, movement in the distance. The same shadows he had seen earlier. They were not his imagination. Someone was out there watching too. His heart raced. Were they thieves? Strangers? Enemies of the girl's kind? He narrowed his eyes, but the figures melted into the dark, leaving only silence behind. He clenched his fists. Whoever they were, their presence meant danger. The girl, unaware of the hidden watchers, kept pushing her body past its limits. She stacked bricks until her arms felt like stone themselves. Her breathing grew heavy, her lips cracked, but her willpower did not break. The widower's thoughts grew louder. She is only a child. Why does she fight so hard? Why does no one stand beside her? His memories came like waves. He saw his children in her face, the same stubborn will, the same refusal to quit no matter how hard life became. A lump formed in his throat. For the first time in years, he felt something alive inside his chest, something close to hope. But hope scared him more than despair. The wind picked up, carrying dust into the air. The half-built walls shook under the pressure. The girl pressed her body against them, protecting her fragile dream. She whispered something to herself, words the widower could not hear. Perhaps she was speaking to her lost family, or perhaps to herself. The widower leaned forward, every muscle in his body tense. He wanted to go, to stand beside her, to give her strength, yet his legs felt heavy as if chains held him back. The girl pushed one last brick into place before she collapsed again. This time she did not rise. She lay against the wall, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Her eyes stared up at the stars, filled with pain but also strange peace. The widower could not look away. His hands shook. Something inside him screamed, "Go to her. She needs you." But he stayed in the shadows, silent, his heart battling itself. That night, as the colony slept, two lonely souls stood on the same ground, one building a home with broken hands, the other watching with a broken heart. And somewhere in the dark, the unseen watchers waited. The struggle was only beginning. The morning sun rose slowly, painting the colony in shades of gold. Birds circled overhead, their wings cutting across the sky, while the air carried the smell of dust and stone. By the half-built wall, the alien girl was already awake. She rubbed her tired eyes and stood again, picking up another brick. Her body was weak, but her spirit burned stronger than the day before. Not far away, the widower stood in silence. He had not slept much. All night, the image of the girl haunted him. The way she worked until her body collapsed, the way she rose again with nothing but sheer will. His heart whispered that she was not just building a house, she was fighting for something bigger, something he himself had once lost. Finally, he took a step forward. His boots pressed into the dust, and the sound made the girl's ears twitch. She turned quickly, her bright alien eyes locking onto him. Fear flashed across her face. She picked up a stone, ready to defend herself. The widower raised his hand slowly. His voice was low, calm. "I mean no harm." The girl narrowed her eyes, but her hands shook. For a long moment the two stared at each other. One human carrying grief, one alien carrying hope. The air between them was heavy with unspoken stories. He pointed at the wall. "You build this alone?" The girl stayed silent. She simply nodded once, her jaw set tight. The widower looked at her small, blistered hands. A wave of guilt swept through him. He had watched her suffer in silence, and now the truth was clearer than ever. This child had no one. He bent down, picked up a loose brick, and placed it beside her wall. The girl's eyes widened. She stepped back, unsure if this was a trick. "I only help," the widower said softly. "Nothing more." For the first time, the girl's gaze softened. She studied his face, searching for lies, but found only weariness and sorrow. Slowly, she lowered the stone from her hand. Together, they began to work. The widower lifted the heavier bricks, his strong arms steady. The girl carried the smaller ones, her steps light but determined. They did not speak, yet their movements began to flow together like two rivers joining into one stream. As the hours passed, the wall grew taller. Dust clung to their skin, sweat dripped from their foreheads, and the sound of stones scraping against each other filled the air. At one point, the girl tripped on uneven ground. Before she could fall, the widower reached out and caught her arm. For a second, they both froze. She looked at him with surprise, and he quickly let go, embarrassed by the sudden closeness. But deep inside, something stirred. A bond neither of them had expected. The girl's lips curved into the smallest smile, quick and fragile, but real. It was the first smile the widower had seen in years, and it pierced through the dark walls of his heart. They continued working until the sun reached its highest point. When the girl grew tired, the widower handed her a flask of water. She hesitated, then accepted it, drinking in small sips. The gesture was simple, but it carried weight. It was trust, fragile and new, the villagers noticed. From a distance, whispers began to spread. Humans and aliens did not often mix in such ways. Some frowned, suspicious. Others only shook their heads. But the widower ignored them. For the first time since losing his family, he felt like he was building something real again. Not just walls, but a connection. As the day neared its end, the girl sat by the wall, her small legs stretched out. The widower placed one last brick into the growing structure, dust rising around him. He looked at the house and then at her. "You build strong," he said, his voice rough but gentle. The girl met his eyes. Her lips moved, and for the first time she whispered, "Thank you." Her voice was soft, almost broken, but it was enough to shake the silence that had lived between them. The widower's heart clenched. Two simple words had carried more weight than 1,000 speeches. Night began to fall. The shadows returned, watching from the edges of the colony, unseen by the girl but felt by the widower. He turned his head, scanning the darkness. Whoever they were, he knew they would not stay hidden forever. But for now, there was peace in the dust. Two strangers, one human, one alien, had placed the first stones of something greater than walls. A bond was forming, fragile yet unbreakable. And in the stillness of that evening, the widower realized something he had almost forgotten. He was no longer completely alone. The night was cool, with the stars spread wide across the black sky like diamonds. A small fire burned beside the half-built wall, its light flickering on the bricks. The alien girl sat close to the flames, hugging her knees, while the widower placed a few dry sticks to keep the fire alive. For hours, they had worked side by side without words. Now silence wrapped around them again. Only the crackle of fire and the distant hum of insects filled the air. The widower looked at her from the corner of his eye. He could see the tired lines on her face, the way she pressed her lips tightly together, as if holding back something too heavy to speak. He wanted to ask her questions about her family, her people, her dream, but his voice stayed trapped. He had not spoken much in years, and words felt like rusted tools inside him. Then, without warning, the girl spoke. Her voice was low, but each word cut through the silence. "They are gone." The widower turned toward her slowly. "Who?" She hugged her knees tighter. "My parents. My brother. All of them." Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to continue. "Soldiers came. Fighting broke our village. Fire took our home. They did not make it. The widower's heart stopped for a moment. He had seen war. He had heard screams. But hearing it from her lips carried a weight that sank into his bones. The girl's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. I ran until my legs broke. I thought someone would find me, but no one came. No one cared. So I decided. She looked at the wall they had been building. Her small voice trembled. If no one gives me a home, I will build one myself. Her words struck the widower harder than any blade. He stared at the half-built structure, crooked bricks, weak walls, but full of stubborn hope. He realized it wasn't just a shelter. It was her way of surviving, of keeping her family alive in memory. The widower swallowed hard. Memories of his wife and children rose like ghosts. The laughter in their old house, the warmth of family dinners, the dreams they had shared. All gone, taken by sickness and time. He had buried not just them, but also his will to live. And now, sitting beside this girl, he felt that old wound reopen, yet with the pain came something else. A flicker of understanding, a fragile thread tying his grief to hers. You are strong, he whispered, his voice rough. The girl shook her head. No, I am only alone. The widower's hands tightened into fists. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, but the words stuck. He too had lived in the prison of loneliness. He knew how heavy it was. After a long pause, he picked up a broken brick and placed it near the wall. Even broken pieces can build, he said quietly. You are not weak. The girl looked at him, her alien eyes wide with surprise. She searched his face, and for the first time, she did not see only sorrow. She saw a spark, faint but real. The fire crackled between them. The night deepened, and for a while silence returned, but this time it was different. It was not empty. It was shared. Far in the distance, whispers stirred in the colony. Villagers had begun to notice their strange companionship. Some said it was unnatural. Others said it was dangerous. Few believed it was a sign of hope. But the girl did not care about their voices, and the widower did not either. In that moment, by the firelight, only two broken souls existed. One child who refused to surrender, and one man who had almost forgotten how to live. The widower gazed at the stars, his heart heavy but alive. For years he had carried grief like chains, but tonight, listening to her story, he felt something shift. Perhaps the universe was not only about loss. Perhaps it was also about what could be rebuilt. The girl leaned against the unfinished wall, her eyes closing as sleep finally claimed her. The widower kept watch, his gaze shifting once more toward the dark edges of the land. The shadows he had seen before flickered again, silent, waiting. Danger still lingered. But for now he stayed beside her, guarding her fragile dream. And as the fire burned low, he whispered to himself, almost like a promise. You are not alone anymore. The days passed slowly, and the half-built wall began to rise higher. What had once looked like a pile of crooked stones now started to resemble the outline of a real house. Each morning, the alien girl was awake before the sun. Each morning, the widower was there too, standing in silence before lifting the first brick. Together they worked. Their hands grew rough, their bodies covered in dust, but their rhythm became steady. Where one grew tired, the other picked up the weight. Where the wall bent crooked, they adjusted it side by side. The girl's small laugh escaped once or twice when the widower clumsily dropped a brick on his foot. For years, no sound had startled his heart as much as her rare laughter. The house grew slowly, brick by brick, but so did something else. Trust. The girl no longer looked at him with suspicion. She began to share small things. A piece of bread she had hidden. A small tune she hummed while working. The widower listened quietly, his grief softening with every gesture. But the villagers had begun to notice more. From across the colony, whispers followed them. Men muttered in taverns. Women shook their heads as they carried water. Children pointed, asking why a human and an alien were building together. Some called it foolish. Some called it dangerous. One evening, as the girl stacked bricks, a group of villagers passed by. They slowed their steps, staring openly. One of them scoffed, "What is this? A human wasting his time with an alien child?" The widower paused, his jaw tightening. For years he had ignored people's voices, but now with the girl beside him, the words burned deeper. He did not answer them. He only kept building. The girl's eyes lowered, her shoulders shrinking under their gaze. The widower noticed. He placed a brick firmly into the wall and said in a steady voice, "A house is not wasted." His words were simple, but the villagers heard the iron behind them. They walked on, muttering. That night, the girl sat quietly by the fire. Her alien eyes reflected the flames, but her spirit looked dim. They hate me, she whispered. The widower looked at her. They do not know you. They will never know me, she replied softly. He wanted to tell her she was wrong. He wanted to promise her a better future. But promises were heavy things, and he had broken too many already. Instead, he said, then we build stronger. A wall that even hate cannot break. The girl looked at him, her lips trembling, then nodded. The next day they worked harder than before. The widower taught her how to place stones so they would lock together tightly. He showed her how to spread the mud evenly so the walls would not crumble. She learned quickly, her small hands copying his larger ones. Slowly, their crooked wall became straighter, stronger. By midday, sweat poured down their faces, but the house stood taller than either of them now. For the first time, the widower stepped back and imagined it finished. A roof above, windows cut out, a door standing firm. For the first time in years, he could picture laughter inside walls again. As they rested under the shade of the half-wall, the girl whispered, "This is not just my house. It is ours." The widower froze. The word ours echoed inside him, breaking through layers of loneliness he had buried deep. He did not answer, but his silence carried more meaning than words. From the shadows at the edge of the land, eyes still watched. Unseen figures studied the house, their outlines hidden by trees. The widower sensed them again, a cold feeling crawling down his spine, but he said nothing to the girl. He did not want her fragile hope to shatter. As the sun set, painting the sky red, the girl and the widower placed the final brick of the day together. Their hands touched for a brief moment, both covered in mud and dust. Neither pulled away quickly. In that single touch, something unspoken passed between them, something stronger than stone. The house was growing, and so was the bond between them. But in the distance, whispers grew louder and shadows grew darker. The home they built was no longer just bricks in the dust. It had become a spark, one that could either warm hearts or ignite flames of conflict. The wind carried dust across the colony, swirling it like a warning. The house walls now stood higher, but so did the voices of those who disliked what they saw. Whispers had turned into open talk. By the market stalls, by the water wells, people spoke of the strange pair, a human widower and an alien child working side by side. At first it was only words, but words have weight, and soon words turned into action. One evening, as the sun bled red over the horizon, the widower and the girl were stacking the day's last bricks. The air was heavy with silence. Suddenly the sound of boots broke it. A group of men appeared at the edge of the half-built home. Their faces were hard, their eyes sharp with judgment. The widower straightened his back, his tired muscles tense. He knew these men. They were villagers, the kind who believed lines should never blur between human and alien. One of them stepped forward. "You should stop this," he said flatly, pointing at the wall. "This house is a shame. You disgrace yourself standing with her." The girl froze. Her hands clutched the brick she had been carrying, but her eyes dropped to the ground. She had heard insults before. They always cut the same. The widower's jaw tightened. His voice was calm but heavy. "It is only a house," the man sneered. "No, it is poison. Today it is walls. Tomorrow it will be more. Do you want us to live beside them? To call them family?" His words dripped with bitterness. The widower looked at the girl. She was trembling, trying to shrink into the unfinished walls as if they could hide her. His chest ached. Another man kicked at the base of the wall. Dust scattered. The bricks wobbled, but the structure held. The widower's fists curled. "Do not touch it," he warned. "Or what?" The man challenged. "You will fight your own people for her?" The silence that followed was heavy. The widower's heart pounded. For years he had lived as if he were already dead, refusing to fight for anything. But now this house was not just stone. It was hope. It was her dream. And it had slowly become his, too. He stepped forward, his voice low but unshaken. "Yes, if I must." The men exchanged glances, surprised by his defiance. One of them spat on the ground. "You've lost your mind." They turned and walked away, but not before the first man spoke again. "This is not the end. Tear it down yourself, or we will." Their footsteps faded, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. The girl's breathing was uneven. She looked at the widower with wide, fearful eyes. "They will destroy it," she whispered. The widower knelt beside her. For the first time, he placed his rough hand gently on her shoulder. "Then we build again, and again, until it stands stronger than hate." Her eyes shimmered, but no words came. Instead, she nodded slowly, holding back tears. That night, neither of them slept. The widower sat outside the half-built walls, keeping watch. His old rifle lay across his lap, untouched for years until now. In the distance, the shadows moved again, those same figures he had noticed before. They lingered, silent, watching. He aimed his eyes toward them, his body ready. Whoever they were, they had waited long enough. Danger was no longer hidden. It was coming closer. Inside the wall's shell, the girl whispered prayers in her alien tongue. She did not know if anyone listened, but it gave her courage. The widower tightened his grip on the rifle. His late wife's voice echoed in his memory. A family is not only blood. It is who you choose to protect. He looked at the half-built home, then at the girl sleeping fitfully against the wall. This was no longer just her fight. It was his too, and when the shadows came, he knew he would stand. The night was restless. The widower did not sleep. He sat by the half-built wall, the rifle resting across his knees, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The alien girl slept fitfully inside the shell of her dream home, curling herself into a ball for warmth. When dawn broke, he was still there. The first rays of sun fell on the bricks, making them glow like fire. For the first time, the unfinished house looked alive, like a heart waiting to beat. But peace did not last long. By midday, the men returned. Not just 2 or 3 this time, but a small crowd of villagers. Their faces were set hard, their voices raised. The whispers had become shouts. "Enough of this," one man barked. "Tear it down before it tears us apart." The widower rose slowly, his back straight, his hands firm on the rifle. Dust clung to his clothes, and his face carried the weight of both grief and resolve. The alien girl stood behind him, clutching the wall as if it could shield her. Her wide eyes trembled with fear, but she did not run. She had run once before, and she had sworn never again. The villagers stepped closer. One of them raised a hammer, ready to strike the wall. The widower's voice cut through the noise like iron. "Touch it, and you answer to me." The hammer froze mid-air. The crowd murmured. Some looked uneasy. Others burned with anger. A woman from the crowd shouted, "Why risk yourself for her? She is not your blood." The widower's voice broke but did not falter. Blood does not make a family. Choice does. Silence rippled across the group. His words were heavy, and they carried something the villagers could not deny. Truth. Still, tension lingered. The hammer shook in the man's hand, but before he could decide, something unexpected happened. From the shadows where the unseen watchers had lingered for days, movement stirred. Figures emerged, other aliens. Their faces were weary, their clothes ragged, but their eyes sharp. They had been watching, waiting, unsure if this human would truly stand beside one of their own. Now they stepped forward. One spoke, his voice calm but strong. "If you destroy her dream, you destroy ours too. We have lost homes before. We will not lose this one." The villagers shifted uncomfortably. What had begun as a human against an alien child had grown into something larger, an act of unity, a test of who they truly were. The widower lowered his rifle slightly, but his stance stayed firm. "This house will stand," he declared. Brick by brick, even against the world. For a long moment, no one moved. Then slowly, one of the villagers, a young boy, stepped forward. He bent down, lifted a loose brick, and placed it gently on the wall. The act was small, but it broke the tension like sunlight through storm clouds. More villagers followed. Not all, but some. They began to help, silently at first, then with cautious purpose. The girl's eyes widened in disbelief. Her lips trembled, and then for the first time in so long she smiled. Bright, fragile, but full of hope. By evening, the house stood taller than ever before. Walls complete, roof beams set in place, the skeleton of a real home finally visible. The girl touched the wall with trembling fingers, as if making sure it was real. The widower stood beside her, dust covering his face, his hands raw from work. Yet his heart felt lighter than it had in years. He looked at the house, then at her. She looked back at him, and in that silence no words were needed. When night fell, a small fire burned inside the new home. The girl sat by it, her head resting on the widower's arm. He stared into the flames, remembering his wife and children. For the first time, the memory did not break him. It warmed him. The girl whispered softly, It is finished. The widower shook his head. No. It is only the beginning. Above them, stars filled the sky. Around them, the whispers of suspicion were fading, replaced by something new. Respect, perhaps even acceptance. The house had become more than bricks and stone. It had become a symbol. Two broken souls had built it together, and in doing so they had built a family,